Hey, beer appreciators, สวัสดีครับ Welcome to Beer Time Story, the platform where beer and brewing knowledge is shared. For today's session, we will have some good burps about on the regional identity of hops. What do we know so far? Topic. The term regional identity may not sound familiar to you, but perhaps its synonym may ring your bell, especially if you are into the wine thing. That word is terroir, a French term that refers to the combination of various factors in the growing of agricultural product in each place that give them their unique identity or unique character. Yes, today we will talk about hop terroir. And in case you forget, hop is also an agricultural product too, which subjects to many variations that influence it. Um, Even though as a brewer or a beer consumer, we often think about consistency. We expect the same hop variety to taste, behave, and perform the same every time, even if deep down we know that this perfect world doesn't exist. The regional identity of hop does exist, but the question is, to what end? How much impact does terroir have on hops? How large of the region or how far between them are we looking at to expect to start seeing that impact? In comparison to the wine world that terroir has been intensively investigated, what about our beer world? What do we know so far? These sets of questions are not from me. In fact, I borrowed them from our guest speaker, who spent the last couple of years together with his team exploring this area, and here's a bit of his background. After receiving his master's degree in 1996 from UC Davis with fermentation science and food engineering background, he landed in the brewing science world by helping Dr. Michael Lewis, which is the brewing professor of brewing science courses at UC Davis at that time, with lectures and consulting works. Then life took him across the state from California to Ohio. There, he became a professor for the food science department at Ohio State University and left the brewing world behind, but not for long. 4 years later, in 2000, Oregon State University was looking for, a fermentation science associate professor, which he seized that opportunity, returned to the brewing world, and start working there until the present day. His current position is a Northwestern professor of fermentation science, and his labs focuses on the study of the contribution of hops to the beer flavor, foam, and physical flavor stability. He's also internationally recognized as an expert in hops chemistry, and the most recent works from his lab are about the regional identity of hops. So please welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Tom Shellhammer.
Hey,
Hey, Dr.
how you
Tom.
doing?
Oh,
Hey, how
yeah,
you
I'm,
doing? Thanks for having me
I'm
on your podcast.
my pleasure. Should like say hello, hi, welcome to the platform, or should I say kia ora?
Yeah, kia ora. Exactly. I'm spending a few months in New Zealand on a sabbatical from OSU, learning about the
Right.
New Zealand hop industry and the New Zealand brewing industry, and having quite an amazing time down here. I'm just falling in love with the stunning beauty of New Zealand and seeing some really interesting similarities and differences between the North American hop industry and the New Zealand industry. So, and one of them has to do with like regional identity, among other things.
That's nice. But you still have plan to go back, right, to
Oh
OSU?
yeah, yeah, exactly. I'll be heading back in a few months. I'm in early May, and
Okay.
time to catch the North American hop season in
Yeah.
2025. So yeah, it's a good. It's kind of chasing the sun a little bit from the northern hemisphere to come down here
Right.
to the south, but it also gets me to see what's going on in the New Zealand industry at a time when the hops are is still in the ground. Well, not still in the ground, but still strong.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when I tried to reach you out, right? And then I got the message back from you that you were in New Zealand. And I was like, huh, they are about to harvest the hop there. That shouldn't be a coincidence that you are there.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's a great time to be down here to actually see it kind of unfold. Right now, here we are. It's like the end of March, and hop season, or at least the harvest season, is just coming to an end here. There's still a few growers that are still harvesting, but it'll be wrapped fairly soon, with the exception of one grower who's down the southern part of the South Island.
Right.
So, yeah.
Cool. And just, I'm just like wonder, like, do you find any standout things, or the thing that you can observe that they are doing things a bit different than the grower in the US so far?
So like there's several things. One obvious one is that there's no fungal diseases
Oh yeah.
In New Zealand. So as a result, the growers don't do they do hardly any canopy sprays. They don't need to spray for powdery mildew or downy mildew or verticillium wilt.
Right.
And if they have the major insect issue here would be spider mites, two-spotted spider mites.
Right.
And they can address that pretty easily by using predator mites. And if they keep an eye on a hop yard, they can actually basically feed in predator mites, and those predator mites do a really good job keeping the two-spotted spider mite under control. So they're really not spraying anything on the plants at all. They'll spray, depending upon the grower, they might do some spraying at the ground. Most growers do this to like burn back any growth of plants. They don't. They want to just focus the growth into the plants that they've strung. Although here there's a pretty broad use of sheep to go into the hop yard and basically do the weeding for them. It's interesting. You look at a hop field, and the bottom basically 1 meter is just all open from the sheep. The sheep love the hop leaves. Yeah. So they're really good at taking care of that part of the canopy, which is really interesting to see.
That's cool.
So the inputs that growers use in New Zealand are far less than what you would find in the rest of the world, certainly in North America and in Europe. Fighting disease is a kind of a major thing, and some growers are having to spray hop yards almost weekly. So that's one thing. I think another thing that's interesting, and that's kind of a part that I'm sort of curious to like probe a little further, like with some science down the road, is the role of UV. There's a pretty decent hole in the ozone layer over
the ozone layer, right? Yeah.
Yep. The UV intensity is way up there, like just off the charts relative to what you'd find in Europe and North America. I mean, you feel it when you stand out in the sun in the summertime. And so I think that has an impact on the plants. And certainly, I think the wine grape growers think that it does. When you look at Sauvignon Blanc, that's grown around the world. The New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, like particularly for a particular set of thiols that drive a lot of this like sort of tropical aroma, it's a thiol called 3-sulfonyl-hexanol, and that thiol, actually the precursors to that thiol, are just off the charts in New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc juice that you don't see elsewhere, and we think that might have some similar impacts on New Zealand hops. Not that you need to be careful about how much parallel you draw between hops and grapes, because they're botanically very different plants. But yeah, that's another sort of standout thing that I think of, because I can feel it. And then I would say a third one is that it kind of gets back to how the growers are managing their fields. There's at least the farms that I visited, there's much less tilling. There seems to be a greater focus on soil health, using cover crops, using sheep to provide weed control. So, and it's, I think an observation I've had just around New Zealand in general is that the Kiwis seem to be, like everybody, seems to be consciously interested in taking care of their land and taking care of their country. I mean, it's a relatively small island, and so I think the average consumer here has maybe a closer tie, at least understanding wise, of agriculture and where their food comes from. At least I'm kind of like stepping out on a limb here and projecting, but relative to the U.S., where I think many folks don't really have a sense of where their food comes.
That connection, right?
That connection, exactly. Yeah. And so I think they feel connected to the land as well, and they take care of it. And you see it, like when you're just like the national parks here are just amazing, and they're immaculately clean, and people are proud of them, and people take care of them. Even the visitors, they don't trash the place. Everything is in great shape, and I think and the hop yards are the same way. The growers are very proud of them
That,
and take care of them. It's not that the North American growers and the or the U.S. growers and
mhm.
European growers don't, but
It's just different.
the consumer perspective, yeah, it just feels different. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's pretty cool. That's kind of one of the neat things about going someplace and living there for a while, as opposed to just
Mhm.
for 7 days as a tourist. You kind of start seeing, taking these
Yeah,
observations.
that's nice. And the New Zealand hops, it's one of a kind hops that out there in the market. I had a chance to spoke with Dr. Ron Beatston last year
Yeah.
about
Uh-huh.
New Zealand hops, and he's like one of a kind man. Very good.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I
Yeah.
was riding around the hop yards with Ron. I was riding co-pilot in
Mhm.
Ron's car today. We were visiting Hinatoi hops and to look at some of their operations and just they still have some hops that are hanging in
Mhm.
the hop yards. There's
Right.
there's an excess amount of hops in inventory right now, and so the growers are growing less and picking less, and so it's kind of a unique opportunity to look at really late harvest, like hops that are like way beyond
Mhm.
what
Hang
they normally
around.
should be
Yeah.
harvested, and getting a chance to evaluate them. So anyway, so Ron and I were out visiting Dean Palmer at his place, and it was Ron's. Yeah, he is the guy who developed so many of the hops that
Yeah.
the New
He's
Zealand industry uses, and I mean, well, produces that
yeah.
the global brewing industry uses. So yeah, I feel fortunate to get the chance to spend time with Ron.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so I think we warm things up a bit now. I just
Cool.
have one question for you that's not related to the topic, like slightly off, but
Mhm.
I just wanna just to address it and see how did you become connected to the hop world? Like what kind of um, what sparked your attention that for you to start diving down this hop research
Yeah,
thing?
that's a good question. Like I came to like in your introduction, I was working as a professor at Ohio State University, and this position at OSU came open. I moved here, not here, but moved there in 2001.
Right.
And like part of the program, like of any faculty member at a large research university like OSU is you need to have a really strong research program. I mean,
Hmm.
the three things that I do is like I do carry out research, I teach students, and then I connect with the industry, kind of connect the research that I have to the industry,
Hmm.
and add sort of like a liaison between the university and the let's say my stakeholders, which would be brewers and now hop growers. So I was looking for areas to do research, having brought some background from UC Davis, but not a strong, long line of brewing history. When I was at Ohio State, I was doing novel food processing technologies, high pressure processing, not brewing. And
Right.
OSU has had this long connection to the USDA hop
Hmm.
research program. The
Right.
USDA hop program started there in the 1930s, and as a result, like there's this hop research that's going on in Corvallis. It's often
Hmm.
going on with federal scientists, that is the national government's scientists, the United
Hmm.
States Department of Agriculture. They're hop
Yeah.
breeders and hop pathologists. But OSU has been part of this because it's been happening on OSU land, and there's been OSU scientists that have been helping out.
Hmm.
But the varieties that have come out, like Cascade, for instance, that came out of the USDA
Yeah.
breeding efforts. So anyway, I was looking around for like opportunities to where to start making an impact, and there was all this activity in hops, and particularly an organization called the Hop Research Council
Hmm.
that provides support to. Well, it's like essentially they're kind of like the middleman between the needs of the hop and brewing industry and
Hmm.
scientists who can help them answer
Contribute.
questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I got a project in 2002 that looked at some initial stuff on hop bitterness, and that was kind of like the initial catalyst that got things
Right.
started. And then shortly after that was a research project from John A. Haas on bitterness, and then after that it was like okay, the engine started up, and I was also looking at beer packaging and was looking at malting,
Hmm.
but like the hop thing really kind of took off, and at that time there seemed to be interest, and it was like a matter of where do I find funding? How do I find it? How do I get a research program going? And it was like, it just kept going. And 10 years later, I'm like, I'm in it, and all my stuff is pops. And then that actually is kind of a good thing, because then I become viewed as like an expert in this, and which I am now. And that drives more interest and more research into the department, or into my lab. And so, yeah, that's kind of, it's interesting how life does this. You kind of you move in one direction, and something, just changes your trajectory a little bit. Like going from Ohio State to Oregon State, and then looking for something, then the hop thing. It's like, chung, chung, chung. That's where I am now. And then almost 25 years later, I'm a hop expert.
Right.
That's kind of how it goes. Like, you just focus
guys.
a big part of your life on something, and next thing you know, you're
there. I mean,
you're the guy.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing the story.
Sure.
And I think we now can serve the main course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, which is terroir, right?
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Tom, I think right off the gate, let's first talk about the word terroir. Can you help tell us what is it, and then what are the key factors that can potentially
so terroir is like as you mentioned in your introduction, terroir is a French word that has to do with perfect. This slide is great. That kind of focuses on the things about a place that influence the expression of an agricultural product. I don't think of terroir in terms of like technology,
right.
Like iPhones or cars or whatnot. It's really focused on agricultural products, and like a common one that I think people would kind of relate to is wine. People probably have heard maybe terroir the first time with wine, potentially. There is terroir with tea. There's been terroir with evidence of terroir with coffee, with cocoa. And you often see this then in like regionally labeled products,
right?
Like, chocolate or cocoa from Ghana, or coffee beans from Hawaii,
Guatemala,
from Costa Rica or Guatemala, or Ethiopian coffee. And the reason that is there is not just to, there's like a reason that the place is identified, because there are these differences that are distinctive for that particular region.
Right.
And so the concept, let's say, with any agricultural product, let's take wine grapes, because that's something that has been studied a fair amount. You got these different inputs from where the plant is growing that can affect it, and you see that on this figure here. So like soil is a biggie. Soil and climate, those are huge. And the two are interrelated. That is, the soil in any place is really dictated by the climate, because how the soil is formed. Basically, you've got like mountains that have been lifted up, and they're washing into valleys, and the extent of the amount of rainfall and the type of like what those mountains are being formed with dictate what's in the soil.
Right.
And so arid climates and rainy climates have different kinds of soils, in part because of the climate. But those two things have a big impact on how the plant grows. That geomorphology, that's kind of like, we would think that as like microclimate. So back to the wine thing, like in, let's say in Germany, where it's cool, like in the Moselle Valley, the wine grapes are growing on hillsides, really steep hillsides that are facing to the south, so they get warmth. If they're on the north side, there isn't enough sun and there isn't enough warmth, and so they don't grow well. So the angle of the sun can have an impact in this wine grape example. Flora and fauna, these are things that are in the vineyard, or in the whatever the product is growing, but we're kind of using the grape analogy. Right. And so this can be like birds and insects, but it can also be microbial elements. And I think there's evidence that the soil microbiome and the canopy microbiome could have an influence on some of the characteristics that we see in the finished plant. Right. And then, of course, we got variety, like different varieties can respond of a particular agricultural product, respond differently to these different inputs. And at the very bottom, we got farm management. So this is an area where some people might argue it doesn't belong in the terroir definition. I think it does, from the standpoint that the things that would impact, well, if you look at soil, for instance, if a grower is growing grapes or hops
Mhm.
in really
Mhm.
sandy soil versus really clay soil, they
Mhm.
manage how they're farmed differently. The sandy soil holds water to a less degree than the clay-like soils. It holds nutrients less, and so growers will fertilize the sandier soil or the plants in the sandier soil differently than they would in the clay soil. Or there might
Right.
be disease. And if
Mhm.
disease has an impact, that's part of that flora fauna thing. If there's,
Mhm.
like, let's say, for instance, with both grapes and hops, they have got fungal, and depending upon where they're grown in the world, they might have pretty pronounced fungal diseases. The grower's not going to just stand back and let the disease take over the vineyard or the hop yard. They're going to intervene with
Right.
like fungal sprays, whether it be just applying sulfur, that's not common for wine grapes, or
Mhm.
other like specific chemistries that would impact and knock down certain fungal diseases. But altogether, these things end up resulting in the product, whether it be wine grapes or hops, that
Mhm.
has a characteristic that is expressive of that place. So, for instance, with wine, um, if you have got like a particular hop variety, I mean, excuse me, wine grape variety, I think of Bordeaux, like you've got, it's kind of a blend of different varieties, 5 different
Mhm.
varieties, but still they're all kind of, it's heavily Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, um, these kind of full-bodied reds. The the wines that are produced within certain regions within the Bordeaux region, regardless of which grower, tend to express similar types of characteristics. And that's
Mhm.
kind of the
Mhm.
terroir element. Versus if you were to go to California or go to Argentina, um, and or South Africa or Australia and taste wines that are made from the same grapes, there would be a difference, and that's the terroir influence. Um, One thing that terroir isn't, it isn't like a vote of good or bad. Like you've got
Mhm.
good terroir, bad terroir, or good grapes or bad grapes. It's more about the characteristics that are expressed in the agricultural product. You can still have good and bad fruit, or good and bad cocoa, or good and bad hops, depending upon a variety of things, how they were
Right.
managed, or if it's a real heavy drought year, everything is struggling. But within that, um, the place has its own influence on let's call it the sensory characteristics of these agricultural products. So that's what terroir is. And the work that we were doing starting in late 2018 and early 2019 was to try to get a
Mhm.
sense on whether that exists in hops. And
Right.
we had the projects actually got started with a hop farmer in Oregon, called Coleman Agriculture.
Mhm.
They're the
Mhm.
largest hop farmer in Oregon. They produced about roughly 2,000, but they had about 2,000 acres of hops under cultivation.
Mhm.
Um, they're Oregon's largest grower. And because they're a large grower, they have farms, or it's hard to how you can call it. It's one large farm growing
Right.
operation, but they have
Mhm.
individual fields in different
Right.
parts of
Right.
the Willamette Valley. And they would
Mhm.
have brewers that would come for hop selection, and
Mhm.
brewers, like same brewers, year on year, in a blind evaluation, would be selecting certain varieties from the same field over and over again.
Right.
They were kind of curious as to why that is. Like it's beyond just random chance. And
Mhm.
so the question was, is there really a difference between different fields? I mean, it seemed obvious that there is, because some brewers are
Mhm.
picking that out year on year. And then the next
Blindly,
question
right?
was, if there is a difference, then what is it? Like, what's how do you describe that difference? And then
Mhm.
even beyond that, what is it that's driving that difference? What is it that's making a particular field stand out to a particular brewer, or a handful of brewers? So that's kind of how the project got started, was just within the Coleman Ag
Mhm.
infrastructure, looking at how 3 different varieties compared at different growing locations within the Willamette Valley, within their farming system,
That
which
farming.
I think was
Yeah.
a great project to start with, because the management philosophy of the farm is consistent because it's the same farming operation, but we
Yeah,
had
yeah.
different parts of the Willamette Valley and different soil types. We worked closely with the soil scientist to study how and why the hops would be different from different fields. And there were clearly field-to-field differences that were observable with chemistry and sensory. So it was really interesting to see.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, like, you you stole my question
Oh,
already.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like,
exactly right.
yeah,
Which
but
I'm like, some,
that's completely
yeah,
fine.
yeah. I mean, I think that you see that in that the question was around what evidence is there of having
Yeah.
some regional identity, and that's one example. And I've heard it from other growers as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've heard it from brewers as well, who have some they perceive that like different regions have different
Hmm.
expression of hop aroma, and this is
Yeah.
typically in the hops themselves. If they do like a hand rub and smell the
Right.
hops or on hop
Hmm.
grinds,
Hmm.
one of the challenges that we were trying to answer as well is whether those differences that would exist in the hops themselves actually are translated into differences in beer.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
with wine grapes, it's pretty straightforward because winemakers make wine with 100% grapes,
Yeah.
and
Like,
it would not be uncommon for a
hmm.
winery to make a single lot vintage, like one
Right.
field of
Hmm.
Cabernet or Pinot Noir Chardonnay, um, and then because it has distinct characteristics, and use that as a point of distinction relative to, let's say, another block in
Hmm.
their vineyard. With
Right.
brewers, it's pretty rare that brewers make a single hop beer,
Yeah.
and even if they do, the hopping bill is just part of the malt selection that they've got, and
The
they're
yeast
pretty
selection. Yeah.
yeast selection exactly, and then hopping technique. They often are using hops in combination with other varieties.
Yeah.
So that was, that's kind of when you look at how terroir might express itself in beer,
Hmm.
it starts to become blurry depending upon how those hops are used. In the work that we
Right.
did with Coleman Ag and subsequent work that we did a big project where we were comparing Willamette Valley and Yakima Valley.
Hmm.
We did do brewing trials, and we could see differences that were attributable to the samples that came from different farms. Not only in the hop grinds, but in the finished beer. So it's
Right.
not like we would see distinct differences that then suddenly just got all washed out. Um,
Yeah.
in fact, I think
It's
you have some slides that we
clear.
can look at some point too.
Yeah,
I'll let you.
sure.
Should you just keep me going in the right direction here? Otherwise, I just start talking and talking forever. So
No, I mean it's completely fine. But like I think one thing that I want to note here is that before I found your research, my mindset was that terroir is kind of a it covers in a much larger area. Like different continents or different like something that
yeah,
further away from each other. But in this sub-regional one, it's like, what is it like actually real? But
yeah.
it's
Okay,
real.
that's
I mean,
yeah.
like,
Bring
yeah.
up a really good point. Yeah. So I think like if you look at a hop variety, okay. So let
Hmm.
me back up. Most hop varieties are bred for a particular region. So
Yeah.
let's say like historically, you go back 200 years,
Uh-huh.
the brewers were using German or Czech hops
Oh,
or
yeah.
British hops as kind of like the main hop growing regions. And the if fast forward 200 years, like let's say in the last century, late half of the last century,
Hmm.
many of the breeding efforts in the U.S. and I would say even other parts of the world were to try to make varieties that smelled and tasted like German varieties. The reason being
Hmm.
that much of the world was drinking pale yellow lager beer that
Right.
was drawn from either inspiration of German and Czech styles, or it was being brewed by immigrants of like in the United States, German immigrants who came to the United States in the mid
Hmm.
1800s that were brought with them lager brewing styles, and then the consumers liking those beers. But anyway, there's a lot of pale yellow lager beer, and
Yeah.
German hops and Czech hops do great in that. And what many breeders in different parts of the world were doing, we're trying to create replacement varieties, because if you take a German variety and try to grow it in North America, or try to grow it in New Zealand, or try to grow it in Japan or Argentina, just whatever hot region, it doesn't do well. It doesn't do well from disease challenges. It doesn't do well from yield. And so the hop breeders for many years were trying to find these replacement varieties. So that's not really an evidence of terroir. I mean, it kind of is, but you wouldn't find many varieties that could grow well around the world. One of those varieties throughout the breeding program that did work pretty well is Cascade. So in the at USGA in Oregon was developing different hop varieties, and one of them was Cascade that came out, and it turns out that it grows fairly well in different parts around the world. And so some of the first terroir studies were looking at, hey, how does Cascade that's grown in Germany compare to Cascade that's grown in the United States,
New Zealand,
or New Zealand, or Slovenia, or I don't know about Poland being in that, but Poland, I mean, they have a big hop growing region. So there we start seeing some pretty distinct differences, enough that if you were to ask a brewer, would you expect New Zealand grown Cascade to be different than North American grown Cascade? They would say, no, yeah, of course. It's not even, they don't even stop. And that's certainly a regional difference, but we're talking, large geographical differences. The next one would be between, let's say, Willamette Valley and Yakima Valley. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So in the Willamette Valley and Yakima Valley, we've got two very different kinds of climates. The Willamette Valley is more, let's say, maritime. It's got it's rains throughout the winter. It's cooler summers, more continuous rainfall throughout the year, even though both Yakima and Willamette Valleys are dry in the summer. While the Willamette Valley is east of the Cascades, it's essentially a desert, and it's all irrigated farming, which Willamette Valley is now all irrigated as well, but the soil type is different. There's more daylight hours. I mean, sunlight, sunny days in Willamette Valley than there is in more sunny days in the Yakima Valley than there is in the Willamette Valley. So, and I think that's one thing that people were wondering is what degree does that terroir between those two valleys, how much of an influence does it have? And then because we were picking different farms within each of these valleys, we could then look at the subregional differences. That is within the Willamette Valley, within the Yakima Valley. And we were also kind of surprised that there was a pretty broad range of chemistry and sensory differences within each of those two valleys, about the same amount as there was between the two valleys. So that's, pretty cool to see that. I think even though we've got some work that we've done in this, and that was in 2020, and we did another trial in 2021. One of the things that is left unanswered is, are there consistent differences that would exist year upon year upon year? In order to do that, you would really need to do these terroir studies for 5 or 10 years.
Subsequently,
because in any one year, we can see, there's a difference between Willamette and
these places.
And then we can go back. We went back the second year. There is different. We do again see differences, and the question is and to know, let's say, for instance, I'm going to just make this up right now. So let's just say Yakima Valley tends to be more for a particular variety, more resinous, more fruity. And let's say the Willamette Valley is more, let's say, tropical and floral of these of a particular variety. Does that kind of expression occur within those regions year after year after year after year, or is it something different? Could it be that in one year it's like that, but in another year maybe it flips? And so there are differences, but they're not consistent. So I think that's one of the things that we've yet to
explore,
pin down, explore exactly. And no one's really has done that. If you look in the scientific literature, people will grab samples of hops from different regions and look at them from chemistry and sensory and go, look at there's differences. Okay, there's differences. The question will come up like, why are there differences? Like you could have, hop maturity could have an impact. If one sample is picked early, another sample is picked late, the harvest window, within the harvest window where you pick that hop is going to have a really significant influence on the chemistry, like how much oils and the oil composition. And so that's one of the challenges with this, as well as any other terroir study, is that trying to control things like maturity or trying to control things like disease pressure or management, it's really challenging. And even just like having different soils, like that's one of the challenging things with terroir. Unless you actually dig up a big hunk of soil and move it to a different location, really trying to understand replace, like, I mean, that's what, someone has said, not really joking, like, okay, to really do this study, you need to grab a few like container loads full of Oregon soil and bring them up to Yakima, and vice versa, bring them from Yakima down to Oregon and grow some hops in them. And then you could actually compare the magnitude of the soil versus the magnitude of the climate. But that's not the case. The soil and climate are typically confounded, dependent on each other.
True. I mean, like, this is kind of a really deep rabbit hole if you're gonna talk
I know exactly. You can find yourself down deep in a hole. I'm like, okay,
true. But I think we've already paved the way to the study that you've been conducting with your team, and I think it is time to take a look at the research, the recent one from your lab. I have to ask for your help to walk us through, the key studies and findings of your recent work. We can start with the workflow first, and then look into the result. All right.
Yeah. Do you want to pull? You had a slide that you. Exactly. So this is this slide that you put together. These are. It's great that you did this. These are slides from images from some of my other presentations, but this kind of gives people a sense of how this goes. So when we are doing our studies, the first thing is just to find a grower who's interested in participating. And once we've identified that grower or growers, like the study where we had Oregon and Washington, we had like 23 separate growers participating across 40 different locations. We would go out to the field with a soil scientist and look at the field to try to understand where in that field it makes sense to start looking at samples. We did this fairly like precision rather than just taking an aggregate sample from the field, because it's hard physically to get a true aggregate sample, because that entire field, like on the left-hand side there, it says site selection. That field might take 2 days to harvest, and so the hops that are picked in the front end of the field, or that picking time versus the back end, are going to be two totally different parts of that field. So what we decided to do is actually go out in the field with a soil scientist, and like those red dots there are tagging 5 different spots in the field. And in the 2019 study, we did multiple sampling at each of the different fields, so we could get a sense of how much variation, not just in subregion, but within the field. And there's definitely field variation depending upon the soil composition. So like, for instance, in this one on the left there's 2 soil types. There's that WO up in the upper right-hand corner, and the WA in the middle. Those are 2 different types of soil. In fact, there's some elevation in the upper right-hand corner. You can kind of see this contour line. So it's basically a side of a hill that comes down into the WA is kind of an old riverbed that drains through there. And in fact, that corner, like, I'm not sure.
Top right or?
Actually, can I turn on a pointer? How do I do that if I want to point stuff?
There's no pointer.
No problem. Sorry. Okay, so point number, let's see, this is where it's 1, 2, like point number 3, which I think is kind of in the top middle. You can kind of see how the ground around that is it's lighter. It's not as green. There's just a band of unique soil there. So anyway, we go out into the field and we dig cores of the soil so that we can measure what's in the soil, and we take a GPS coordinate, so we know that spot.
Right.
We would go out and tag the field. So that the second picture there with the orange
Mm-hmm.
tags, we'd go out in the springtime before the plant has fully grown, but we can get a sense on just kind of how healthy the particular plants are, and take what looks like an average representation there, tag
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
that field, that bind, so we can come back to it later.
Right.
And we would pull out anywhere from 10 to 15 strings of hops. So we get a pretty decent amount of hops. You can see that the third picture
Mm-hmm.
there's a grad student with the pickup truck, and the back's full of hops. So
Yeah.
we would do several loads, as oftentimes hard to get all 15 binds in the back of that one pickup truck. And then we would take them to a small scale picker, pick them, and
Mm-hmm.
then put them in onion sacks and put them in a commercial kiln and dry them on farm. And
Right.
then we would take the dried hops back to OSU, and then we would process them there. So that picture there is with the kind of looks like these vapors. That's us running the hops through a pellet mill to make hop
Mm-hmm.
pellets out of that. We would
Right.
then vacuum seal those and store those frozen until it's time to evaluate them. And then at the far right, we've got the different kinds of hop evaluations. So we would do chemical analysis of the composition in the hops, both from a non-volatile, like the bitter acids, to the
Mm-hmm.
essential oil composition, and then we do sensory analysis. We take grinds of the hops, and we would do sensory characterization. So we can take both chemistry and sensory and look at them at the end, and that combination of chemistry and sensory is then what gives us an idea of the regional differences. Now, some assumptions here are that the hops are being harvested at their similar maturity, and that's
Okay.
a little bit squishy, because we're going into these fields and grabbing the samples ourselves before the field is commercially harvested, and each grower is going to have their own decision structure or
Oh yeah.
decision,
Yeah.
the tree, as to when they decide when to pick a particular variety. Now, in general, they're all picked fairly similar in time, because
Mm-hmm.
like each hop variety has a fairly narrow picking window. So you're not going to see a grower in a particular state picking their hops, let's say 2 weeks off from all the other growers, because it's just it'd be either too immature or too over mature. So there is some reasonable band outside
Mm-hmm.
which the grower's not going to pick. But nonetheless, the grower's making decisions not just based upon our study, but like what else is happening to the farm.
Yeah.
Are they like, if that's part of the like machinery breaks down, and they slow down while they're trying to fix stuff, so that kind of back things up. Or there may
Mm-hmm.
be rain coming, and so they pick earlier because they don't want to be having to stop during the rain. Or
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole variety of reasons. So
Right.
maturity, like controlling maturity, is one of the slight challenges here. You have
Gotcha.
another slide. Why don't you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So the second part of the terroir study is to say, if we can find differences, can we understand what sort of things are actually driving those differences? Like, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, if we see that there is a difference between Yakima and Willamette Valley, do we understand what it is about those two valleys that would dictate why we might see differences? And so to do that, we characterize the soil, because soil is important. So there's Andy Gallagher on the left-hand side there. He's grabbed a 5-foot core of soil, and he's going through at different measurements throughout the soil, hand
Mm-hmm.
texturing it to get a sense on what is the soil class, how much silt and sand
Oh.
and clay is in it. We'll take a sample of that and send it to a lab and have them measure all the macro and micronutrients in it, so we can get a sense on the
Wow.
soil chemical health.
Mm-hmm.
That second picture there is like looking at weather and climate data. So we work with we got a big geosciences group at OSU, Oregon State University, that
Mm-hmm.
can give us some really useful information around the temperatures and wind and rainfall and
Mm-hmm.
sunlight exposure and cloud cover anywhere in the Northwest. We just got to give it a GPS coordinate, and it'll return to us all of that data for whatever day we want. So it's a nice tool to be able to look retrospectively at like all the different regions. So we
Awesome.
can look at weather data, and we
Mm-hmm.
can then the third picture is looking at understanding how the growers are managing the farm. So we get from them their spray records, like how often are they spraying for hops, and we use how are spraying for disease or
Mm-hmm.
insects. We use that as a measure of disease pressure. Like if there's
Mm-hmm.
more disease, they tend to be spraying more than less disease. And so that gives us that's kind of the basic part about the management. I don't believe we did
Right.
anything like training dates. So that's kind of giving us insight into soil, weather / climate, and farm management. And then the
Mm-hmm.
last slide there is just a picture of statistical analyses. We will basically start doing multivariate statistics to understand what are the similarities and differences among the different locations. And then we
Right.
can lay on top of that the sensory chemistry changes and look at can we understand what things are going on from soil, weather, or farm management that might be correlating with the changes we're seeing in the finished hops, to try to give us a sense on what is it that's affecting terroir.
All right. Let's look at the result.
Yeah, look at the results. Good results are kind of fun. So this is a picture from the 2020 study where we had those 23 growers, and we had basically 10 fields each of Cascade and Mosaic in
Mm-hmm.
both the Willamette Valley, which is on the left-hand side, and the Yakima Valley, which is on the right-hand side. And you can see in that upper right-hand corner of the second graph on the right, those little red
Mm-hmm.
dots. So
Yeah.
that's Oregon and Washington.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the sites of the study were. So where it says A, that's the Willamette Valley, and B, that's the Yakima Valley. And the distance between those two is about 400 kilometers between those two. And there's a mountain range that goes right down the middle, the Cascade Mountains.
Right.
And then within those states, that's what we're seeing in the colorful pictures here. So the left-hand side is the Willamette Valley, and you can see there's farms that are scattered on both the left-hand side and the right-hand side of I-5. And that's essentially the left-hand side of the valley, the western side up against the coastal mountains, or the right-hand side, which is in the foothills of the Cascades. And because the prevailing winds tend to come from the west and blow from left to right, there's different temperatures that you get. Like the right-hand side tends to be hotter and has less diurnal flux, that is less change between evening lows and daytime highs than the left-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different kinds of soil in there. We get kind of the same thing happening in Yakima. You can see we've got farms that are located all throughout the Yakima Valley, from way up in the northwest corner, which is Yakima, down to kind of like the southeast corner, which is by Prosser, almost into the Tri-Cities. So that's kind of the whole, that crescent is what we would call the Yakima Valley.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
So that's where the samples are coming from. And what you see in those colors, like the things that are blue, like either dark blue on the left and light blue on the right, those are Cascade samples or Cascade fields.
Okay.
And the brown and yellow, those are the Mosaic fields. So these are two different hop varieties. Cascade's a public variety. We talked about it already in this discussion. It's a public variety produced at or developed, bred at by the USDA in Oregon and Corvallis. Mosaic is a private variety bred by the hop breeding company. Jason Kroll is the breeder for that, and so we have both, a public and a private variety. There are also two different types of aromatic signatures. Cascade is more terpene alcohol driven, tends to be like a combination of piney, citrus, and herbal tea characteristics, while Mosaic is more resinous, tropical, intensely fruity. Sometimes it gets almost kind of stinky BO, or maybe even onion garlicky if it's picked later. So they're very different. Yeah, Mosaic, exactly. Yeah. So it's a combination of terpene alcohols and thiols. So it was good to have these two different varieties in the study.
Interesting.
Next
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is a lot to take in. So
it's like
I know, exactly. So let's start right in the middle. In the middle, we've got a multivariate analysis, statistical analysis that allows us to combine the chemistry and the sensory. So the chemistry data are in green, and the sensory data are in red. And those lines are essentially, or they're vectors, which doesn't really help explain much, but it's like the length of the line, it tells you how important they are. And the direction that they point kind of gives you some idea. And so things that are on that graph that are close to each other have some degree of statistical similarity, and things that are far apart have some degree of statistical dissimilarity. So for instance, if you look at the top middle graph, you can see how there's one long line out to the southwest that says herbal, and then one long line up to kind of the northeast. These are red lines, and that says sweaty. So herbal and sweaty are inversely related to each other. That is, when the herbal signature of the hop goes up, it tends to have less sweatiness, and vice versa. When the sweaty characteristic goes up, it tends to have less herbal. So that's one thing you can see about that. You can see that the sweaty notes, and as well as vegetal, are listed near things like humulene epoxides and beta caryophyllene. Those are the green attributes there. So there may be some associated with that. Personally, I don't believe that sweatiness comes from those terpene alcohols. It's probably coming more from thiols, which we don't have in this chemistry data set. But you can see that you could use the chemistry data set to look at some potential associations between the chemistry and the sensory. And so for the top part, we have that for Cascade, and the bottom graph, we have that for Mosaic. So these are the same kind of analysis with two different hops. And if we look to the left, like for the left on the top, where you're looking at the Cascade data on those blue CW7, CW9, CO5, CO9, those are the Cascade data, which are essentially laid on top of the middle graph. But if we put them on top of the middle graph, it's hard to see everything because there's so much color and so much data, you can't see it. So we basically take those two data sets and just separate them so you can visualize them. So what you see then, like the CW data, the light blue, is all sitting on the right-hand side of that graph. And the CO data, that is Cascade from Oregon, is sitting on the left-hand side of that graph. And that's showing you that there's some pretty distinct separations between the Washington data and the Oregon data in terms of Cascade. So that's the regional difference between those two, like the Yakima Valley and Willamette Valley. I think what's also interesting, and you were talking about how you found this kind of intriguing, is like the subregional differences. So if you go north to south, you can see that there's a pretty broad range in data, right? They're not just all nestled up like two little balls of data left and right. They're actually pretty spread out. And the degree of spread within each of those valleys is of the same order of magnitude as there is between the valleys, which I think is really quite interesting. So that's the Cascade data. And if you look down below it, that's the Mosaic data. And the Mosaic data shows kind of the same sort of behavior, just that because of the statistical associations, it's not exactly like left to right and north to south or up and down. It's like everything's turned like 45 degrees. And so you can still see like the brown data tends to be in the upper quadrant, maybe leaning a little bit more towards the northwest. And the gold data is in the lower quadrant, leaning a little bit more towards the southeast. So it's kind of like this. You got Oregon and Washington. And then same thing, you see that there's a pretty broad range of data between these two, within these regions, the subregional variation. So that's pretty cool. So that's all the chemistry around the actual hop grinds themselves. We take the hops, we turn them into pellets, and then we coarsely grind them and either do our chemistry extractions and measure what's the chemistry, or we put them in front of panelists and they smell them and they start assessing the sensory data. That's how we get those data in the two columns, the green and red data, and then the blue and yellow data. If we go to the right, the very right-hand side, basically what we've done there is we've selected about half of the data points on the far left and made beer with those hop samples. So everything on the left-hand side is just, and middle is just hops themselves. The stuff on the right is beer. And what we're seeing there are the CATA results. CATA stands for check all that apply. It's the same approach that we used for the red data in the middle. It's a sensory descriptive approach. And what we're seeing is how the beers that are made from the hops in the study, how they vary and how you would describe them. And you can see that there's still some degree of separation, not 100%, but like for instance, let's look at on the left hand side. Can you can pull up a pointer on your? Can you pull up a pointer with your stuff or not?
No, I cannot pull up a pointer.
Okay, so I'm trying to see. That's going to be hard to do this. But if you look at CW1 on the left hand side, upper left hand figure, can you see that it's right next to CO8?
Yeah.
Yep.
I can see it.
Yeah. Yep. And then you look at the right hand side, you can see CW1 there sits next to CO4. Right. So that that CW1 on the right hand side, that's a beer sample. And the descriptors that are around it, they're like fruity, melon, floral, tropical.
Yeah.
That's how that beer was described, along with CO2 and CO4.
Yeah.
If you look at it's tiny. What's the upper in the upper left hand quadrant of the on the sample on the right? It's CO10.
CO10, the one that close to vegetable.
Or? Oh yes, CO10. Yes, close to vegetal. Right. It's like vegetal and and then which one? What's the right? What's the descriptor right below CO10?
It's citrus.
Citrus. Okay, so vegetal and citrus. So that beer tended to be more vegetal, citrus, maybe a little bit of sweaty and resinous because it's sitting on the left-hand side, but definitely more vegetal and citrus.
Right.
So that's CO10. It's interesting that if you look at CO10 in the left-hand graph, it's not sitting right on top of citrus. It's got some citrus. It's got citrus and grassy, more floral and resinous. In the hop itself. So there isn't exact translation of what we're seeing in the hop grind and what we're seeing in the finished beer. We are seeing separation. That is the beer samples. They tend to separate by these different states, but not completely. And you can kind of see that if you look down at the bottom, look at the mosaic, you can see the light yellow samples are kind of clustered together with the exception of the M01. And then you've got those two, the MO4 and the MO2 by themselves. So so there are some similarities between the hop data and the finished beer data. It gets a little blurry, but it's not like what we see on the right-hand side looks like completely randomized, like without any structure. There is some structure that is coming from what we see on the hop grind samples. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of our podcast, this is 1 year of data, and to really understand whether this has an effect, we would do this, year on year, and get a sense on do the characteristics that we see in 1 year, do they play out for the same region year on year? It doesn't have to necessarily be the same farm, but like, does a region tend to be expressive of characteristic set of traits?
Right.
And so I think that's kind of like a quasi cautionary statement, is that we can see that there are differences that are attributable to region and subregion. What we don't know is whether those regional differences persist long term. And I'd be hesitant to take these data and then run with it and say, okay, yeah, Willamette Valley is always this kind of descriptors for mosaic, and this kind of descriptors for Yakima Valley. Given that we saw that there's a pretty broad variation within each of the subregions.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that there are significant differences, right? So the idea of brewers going and doing a hop selection and looking at different lots of hops, lots meaning it's like a field or a set that the hop producers are creating. Makes sense, because we can see there's inherent variation that comes from either regional identity or hop management or harvest timing that will reflect itself in characteristics that vary. And one of the things that I found in talking with growers and talking also with hop producers is that there isn't one single archetype of a particular hop variety that everybody wants, and everything else is somehow subpar. Like mosaic, for instance, some people want really fruity, tropical, light smelling mosaic, and there's some other people that want really strong kind of
dank
cannabis, dank, exactly, dank cannabis smelling mosaic, or diesel smelling mosaic, or even a little bit of onion garlic. And I think that's cool, because it means that given that there's a variation in terms of the aromatic expression of this hop, there's like something to please everybody. It's like I said, there's not just one particular profile that everybody's hunting for when it comes to mosaic. And once you're in that bullseye, you got the perfect one, and everything outside of it is somehow less than. It's much more multidimensional, and even the same brewer might want a portion of the mosaic to be lighter and fruitier, and another portion to be heavier and dank, because of the different type of beers that they make. And understanding that
profile then. So
totally.
I mean, for the research, one thing that I think it is, when I really think about it, in my point of view, like when you just walk us through all the process, right? The workflow, the site selection, soil, climate, and then to the hop processing, and then you have to just evaluate, all the results in terms of chemical and sensory. It's a whole year process, right? And you also have to plan for the next season.
I think that's one of the challenges why we haven't seen multi-year projects. We made a pitch to the USDA's specialty block, specialty crop multi-state grant program. I think it was multi-state. And hops are a specialty crop, as opposed to like a like wheat, soybeans, corn. These are not specialty crops. These are large, huge commodity crops. And so USDA treats the funding of research in these two different crops differently, so that because of the scale and the questions that are of interest to corn and soybean growers, they're different than specialty crops. Specialty crops would be like hops, or I don't know if Christmas trees falls in specialty crops, but there's a whole range of specialty crops. They're much smaller niche crops. Anyway, so we pitched a project to them, but it was going to be a multi-year and project and that's the whole point. But it's expensive. Like, to try to do this year on year takes quite a number of people. It took a lot of engagement by the hop industry to do this project. And so that makes it challenging. And I think there's I think some growers are really eager to have this work done, and other growers are less eager. They might think that, hey, there may be more compelling projects to look at rather than regional identity if you're going to spend a lot of money on a multi-year project. So so we haven't seen anybody like dig into this long term. I think that the hop companies have data that could sort of answer some of this question, because they collect data year on year from different fields based upon hop selection and their own chemistry. So maybe if they're keen on understanding those, they may be able to look within their own data, but it's sitting within the hop companies whatever research system as opposed to being outward focused.
Yeah, I mean, I just would like to, shout out to you and your team, and the hop growers in this project, coming up with all this research. It's like it's kind of big things in the hop world.
Yeah, it was a really cool.
Yeah.
I find it really cool to see the hop industry like engage in this, because there was, like I said, 23 different growers that would open up their farms to us coming in and grabbing samples. I mean, we share the data with them. We don't let each other farm know what the other farmers are, but they can see themselves within the entire data set. So we give the data back to them so they can benefit from that. But they also, their willingness to let us come on farm and grab samples and all the the different records that they shared with us was great. It took tremendous effort on their part. So
that's great. There's one thing left, Dr. Tom. Let's serve the dessert, for this hop terroir course. Just to seal this conversation up, to this point, we know that the terroir, even the just regional or sub-regional, is out there. From your point of view, you've already touched a bit about it, but need to elaborate a little bit more. What are some of the key takes away, that hop growers, brewers, and consumer can harvest from this event?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that the region and grower can have an influence on the characteristics of the hop. I'm not talking about like growing good hops or growing bad hops, but like if you're selecting hops, that it should come with no surprise that the hops grown in different regions are going to be nuanced, or maybe not even nuanced. They could be dramatically different depending upon a variety of things, one of which would be growing region. And I think like brewers understand that if they talk about Cascade, like if they're going to see Cascade grown in New Zealand versus Cascade grown in North America, they're going to pretty much know that these are going to be different, have significant differences, characters, exactly.
Yeah.
The thing that we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about is like harvest timing and picking window. And as I said, that was an element of the study that was semi-controlled, but not tightly controlled, in part because there isn't really like a single metric that everybody uses to determine when to pick. But that combination of where the hops are grown, as well as how they were managed and when they were picked, could have some pretty dramatic impact on the expression of that hop. So it's I think it's useful for growers to participate in some degree of, useful for brewers to participate in some degree of harvest hop selection.
Right.
And look for those but those samples that fit the profile of the beers that they want to make. That if they can afford to do that, and if they can get access to that, I think that's beneficial. I know it's complicated by the fact that there's a lot of brewers, and depending upon size and budget, they can't make it to selection. I know there's quite a number of hop companies that will do selections at things like the Craft Brewers Conference. So you get a lot of brewers together at one spot. There's some that are even doing kind of like virtual selections where they'll send samples out. I think that's useful to understand kind of the scope of differences that exist within a particular hop variety. Because I think it ultimately allows the brewer to like tailor the specific hops to particular styles and brands of beers that they produce.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. And I think, we went through a lot of great information today, and probably this is where we will end the session. So
you bet. Exactly. It's been a pretty dense discussion around hop science, but hopefully your viewers found it interesting. And the nice thing about something like this is that you can start and stop and back up and dig into it yourself.
Yeah, cool. Dr. Tom, I mean, thank you so much for joining the platform today and talk with us about what did we know so far about this hop terroir.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me on. Yeah, I hope that your viewers have found this interesting. So, and hope that maybe we'll see each other again in the future. It's a small industry, so.
Yeah, and I will keep looking forward for the research from your lab.
Oh yeah,
To
we've got a lot of
enlighten
more fun
myself.
stuff coming out in the future. We got interesting stuff on wildfire smoke,
Oh
interesting stuff
yeah.
on hop aging, on hop yeast
Hmm.
interactions, hop maturity. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
cool stuff coming down the pipe from the lab. So stay tuned.
Cool. Yeah, I have to just clear my brain and prepare for that part of the
Yeah,
brain
exactly
to
right. Let it digest a
absorb
bit.
your
Cool.
research.
Yeah,
All right, cool.
excellent.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. Take care.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, take care.
Yeah, bye. All right, here you go. We talk about hop terroir. Probably before this session, you might think that it's not really connected to you, but believe me, it did to some extent. The next time that you are out there, buying beers, having beer, tasting beer, especially the hoppy one, think about hop terroir a bit, and it might give you another perspective of the way you appreciate beer and appreciate the growers. All right. So that's it for today. The Good Burp session will be back in no time. Stay tuned. Until next time, cheers and สวัสดีครับ